Saludos a todos los seguidoras del diario El Regional de Piura. Hoy, 9 de septiembre del año 2025, vamos a comentar respecto a los acontecimientos en el Consejo de Derechos Humanos de la Organización de las Naciones Unidas. Juan José Santibáñez, quien es el ministro de Justicia del país, obtuvo permiso para viajar a este evento. Seguramente lo hizo con el mejor de los entusiasmos. Dina Boluarte, creyéndose que es un país ajeno al orden internacional, pensó que iba a tener un ambiente similar al que le preparan las Fuerzas Armadas y la Policía Nacional del Perú en el país. Sin embargo, tuvo una respuesta adversa y de vergüenza para el Perú, porque lo señalan justamente como un país en riesgo frente a la violación de los derechos humanos. Pero veamos, el encargado de velar por el cumplimiento de los derechos humanos en el mundo ve con temor cómo la propaganda en favor de la guerra avanza por todas partes, mientras el concepto de soberanía se refuerza para encubrir la impunidad o tener la propiedad sobre las personas. Todo ello mientras los estados se retiran de los órganos multilaterales que permiten el diálogo y el entendimiento. Conceptos básicos y que se tienen muy en cuenta en el debate del país. Impunidad, justamente con las leyes que se han dado a favor de criminales que violaron, que mataron a gente inocente en la década de los 90. El alto comisionado de la Organización de las Naciones Unidas para los Derechos Humanos ha dibujado este lunes 8 un panorama sombrío en todo el mundo donde la glorificación de la violencia y la erosión del derecho internacional avanzan a grandes pasos. En una intervención ante el Consejo de Derechos Humanos, Volker Türk lanzó una crítica esclarecedora sobre la situación. ¿Qué es lo que expresó? Y que además lo vamos a escuchar. La propaganda pro-guerra está en todas partes, desde desfiles militares hasta una retórica intensificada. Lamentablemente no hay desfiles de la paz. El Ministerio de la Paz afirmó, subrayando la ausencia de instituciones dedicadas a promover la concordia en el mundo que se militariza. La piedra angular de su intervención fue una defensa del multilateralismo y la errónea redefinición de la soberanía nacional, que no debe ser visión como un escudo contra el escrutinio internacional o para encubrir la impunidad, sino como la base misma de un sistema de cooperación del que todos dependen. La Corte de la Organización de Naciones Unidas, o la Carta de la Organización de las Naciones Unidas, dio a luz una nueva era geopolítica al consagrar la igualdad soberana de los estados. La soberanía nacional es el fundamento de las instituciones multilaterales y del derecho internacional, afirmó, como respondiendo a la diplomacia peruana, que opina de una manera diferente, cuya presidenta, que obviamente no tiene mucho conocimiento sobre el particular, cree que las decisiones de organismos multilaterales afectan la soberanía nacional. El comisionado advirtió sobre las tendencias preocupantes de retirada de los marcos multilaterales, citando ejemplos como la salida de Estados Unidos del Acuerdo de París y del Consejo de Derechos Humanos, las sanciones contra magistrados de la Corte Penal Internacional por parte de Rusia y Estados Unidos y la retirada de varios países europeos, por ejemplo Estonia, Finlandia, Letonia, Lituania y Polonia, del Tratado de Ottawa sobre minas terrestres. el rol de cooperación global y regional cuidadosamente elaborado durante décadas para el bien común se está debilitando, lamentó. Y luego mencionó sobre lo que sucede en Gaza, sobre la irracionalidad en el concepto israelí de atacar y de deshumanizar a la población palestina, las consecuencias que están viviendo, la destrucción y la pérdida de vidas humanas. También se refirió a la guerra de Ucrania, donde la regla de la guerra hecha trizas expresa, porque no se tiene en consideración en absoluto el respeto internacional o la normativa internacional. Y en una parte que fue dedicada a América Latina, mostró su preocupación por el espacio cívico y la justicia. Sobre la región latinoamericana, el alto comisionado expresó varias preocupaciones. Y ahí, en ese foro, se encontraba Juan José Santibáñez, un funcionario no apto, no idóneo para ese cargo, pero ahí está como ministro de Justicia Juan José Santibáñez. Pero tuvo la oportunidad de escuchar de manera directa, por lo menos si entendía el inglés, lo que dijo el alto comisionado. Por ejemplo, señaló que las leyes recientemente adoptadas en el Ecuador podrían reducir la responsabilidad de las fuerzas del orden y restringir el espacio cívico, calificando de inaceptables los ataques a su corte internacional. Y se refirió también a Perú. Sobre Perú afirmó que la ley de amnistía aprobada el mes pasado constituye un retroceso para la justicia y la verdad. La Corte Interamericana de Derechos Humanos se ha pronunciado sobre el particular, ha dado medidas provisionales aplicadas a los deudos de las víctimas que fueron ejecutados de una manera indebida en la época de la barbarie. También mencionó que Venezuela ha declarado su intención de retirarse de la jurisdicción de la Corte Interamericana de Derechos Humanos. Un ejemplo más de la tendencia global de desvinculación de los sistemas regionales. Esas sesiones permiten tener un enfoque multilateral, pero al mismo tiempo dialogar sobre el particular. Al escuchar las expresiones del alto comisionado de los derechos humanos, del Consejo de los Derechos Humanos, debe de conllevar para los asistentes una toma de conciencia, que los países deben respetar los derechos humanos y en ese sentido existe toda una normativa que los obliga a tener una actitud frente a la realidad. Lo que viene sucediendo en Palestina es una situación cruel que estas instituciones deberían poner coto, poner fin. Lo que viene aconteciendo en el Ecuador y lo que viene fundamentalmente sucediendo en el Perú son casos típicos de cómo no deben entenderse, los derechos humanos. En el caso peruano no se está defendiendo a militares que lucharon violentamente contra los terroristas criminales. No. Se pretende amparar a aquellos militares, policías, también que aprovechándose de la función y del poder que tenían, la discrecionalidad de utilizar armas, violaron e incluso mataron hasta niños. Pero escuchemos qué es lo que expresó el alto comisionado del Consejo de Derechos Humanos de la Organización de las Naciones Unidas. ¿Qué es lo que expresa? ¿Qué es lo que dijo?
Backsliding for justice and truth. Brutal responses will only provoke more tension and violence.
Human rights law protects all, including the most vulnerable. Yet, attacks on minorities of all kinds are growing as states roll back commitments to tackle and prevent discrimination. Excessive use of force and deaths of people of African descent at the hands of law enforcement persist in many states, often rooted in systemic racism. Indigenous peoples continue to be denied their rights to land and to free, prior and informed consent in mining and other commercial projects. Violations against Roma are widespread in several European countries and beyond, including police violence, hate speech, and systemic exclusion in health, education and housing. Representation of Roma in the European Parliament has shrunk to zero. In China, the progress we have sought for the protection of the rights of Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities in Xinjiang, as well as Tibetans in their regions, has yet to materialize. This is a priority for my office's engagement. Restrictions of the rights of LGBTQ+ people are growing in West Africa, where some countries have adopted or are considering laws that criminalize consensual same-sex relations. In the United Kingdom, people with disabilities will be disproportionately affected by planned cuts to health benefits. In Argentina, austerity measures are having the greatest impact on people with disabilities and older people. Several countries around the world are cutting crucial programs that protect women's rights, including support for survivors of violence and access to sexual and reproductive health care. Maternal mortality is a leading killer of the most marginalized women and girls. This is a tragedy because it is largely preventable. Afghanistan, where women's access to health care, among many other human rights, is severely restricted, has one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the world. 4 years after the return of the Taliban, the erasure of women and girls from public life is almost complete. Policies and practices that violate the rights of migrants and refugees are becoming normalized in some countries. Pakistan and Iran have forcibly returned millions of Afghans to their country, and India has also deported groups of Rohingya Muslims by land and sea. I'm also concerned about recent measures taken by Germany, Greece, Hungary and other European countries to limit the right to seek asylum. The United States has reportedly reached agreement with several governments, including El Salvador, South Sudan, Eswatini and Rwanda, on deporting third country nationals to places other than their homeland, raising concerns about compliance with international law. Kuwait has revoked the citizenship of thousands of people in recent years, leaving many stateless. In Cambodia, changes to the constitution and nationality law allow the authorities to remove citizenship in cases of treason, creating further ways for them to target their critics. In a positive development, North Macedonia has resolved all known cases of statelessness since the dissolution of the former Yugoslavia, the first country in the region to do so. Excellencies, our human rights mechanisms, including this Council, are a force field that protects people against unrestrained power. They warn us of potential harm to come, and we need to heed those warnings. Hate speech is a sign of rising tensions that can lead to violence. Around the world, we witness growing anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, homophobia, racism, and large-scale disinformation campaigns. In Chad, Nigeria, and other countries in the region, conflicts between herders and farmers are aggravated by hateful narratives, escalating to deadly clashes. From South Sudan to Syria, hate speech compounds tensions and widens divisions. The lies and nihilism that fragment societies online translate into real attacks on real people. In Cambodia and Thailand, for example, social media vitriol has been a factor in today's tensions. In Spain, online media were weaponized to instigate physical violence against migrants. In Serbia, online hate speech often goes unpunished. Civic space is rapidly shrinking, with dissent stigmatized, protesters and independent journalists targeted, and the use of excessive force by the police. I reiterate my call for restraint, dialogue and accountability. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, deliberately divisive narratives and historical revisionism continue to undermine peace and reconciliation. In the context of decades of dehumanization of the other, I welcome the recent initialing of a peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan. This is an important step towards upholding and advancing human rights, reconciliation, healing, and lasting peace. We are ready to support both countries in this process. Freedom of expression is fundamental, but it does not protect those who use speech to spur violence and hatred. A growing number of leaders are now instrumentalizing freedom of expression to cover their own speech while silencing those who disagree. This must be called out each and every time. My office engages with national authorities, leaders and media to develop strategies to define and counter incitement to hatred. Elections are a litmus test for governments' commitment to freedom of expression and assembly and the rule of law. Here too, our human rights monitoring raises the alarm and helps to prevent violations. My office has been following preparations for upcoming elections in Cameroon, Côte d'Ivoire, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Malawi, Tanzania and Uganda. I'm deeply troubled that in many of these countries, the authorities are resorting to harassment, exclusion or detention of opposition leaders, restrictions on media freedom, bans on peaceful protest and crackdowns on human rights defenders. Such actions, coupled with disinformation campaigns and hate speech, could feed tensions, polarization and violence. I urge the authorities in these countries to reverse course immediately. Ahead of next year's election in Ethiopia, I am concerned about arbitrary detention of journalists and recent laws that may restrict freedom of association and expression. Against a backdrop of conflict in several regions, the Ethiopian authorities need to ensure conditions for fair, free and inclusive elections. I welcome the agreement for my office to establish a new presence in Bangladesh to support the transition process there. Excellencies, peace and security depend on full respect for human rights everywhere. When the Security Council, the General Assembly, this Council or other intergovernmental institutions discuss the human rights situation in a particular country, it is because this concerns us all in every country. The United Nations Charter gave birth to a new geopolitical era by enshrining the sovereign equality of states. National sovereignty is the foundation of multilateral institutions and international law. When states sign international agreements, they are exercising their national sovereignty, not limiting it. And with that sovereignty comes responsibility. Sovereignty does not mean ownership of people. All governments have a duty to treat all their people, including their political opponents, fairly, to protect them from harm and to respect their fundamental human rights. When they abandon that responsibility, it affects us all. Multilateral conventions and agreements have won incredible support over the past 8 decades and continue to do so today. As sovereign states sign up to them, they guarantee greater freedom and protection for their people. Bhutan, Cameroon, Eritrea and Lebanon recently ratified the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Dominica ratified the Convention Against Torture and Bangladesh ratified its optional protocol. Malaysia and Vietnam have abolished the use of the death penalty for certain crimes, and I am pleased to report that some member states are increasing their engagement with special rapporteurs and treaty bodies. Cuba, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Dominica, Guatemala, Iceland, Rwanda, Saudi Arabia, Senegal, Singapore, Suriname and Zambia recently accepted visits by special procedures mandate holders after more than 5 years. Libya recently accepted the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court for alleged crimes committed between 2011 and 2027. These are not empty gestures. They are tangible acts of leadership and responsibility. They confirm that the international system benefits states and their people in concrete and specific ways. When sovereign states fail to uphold perpetrators of the gravest crimes to account, it is important that others are able to step in through the principle of universal jurisdiction exercised in accordance with international law. For example, in Germany, a Syrian colonel of the former regime was sentenced to life imprisonment for crimes against humanity that took place in Syria, and a court in the Netherlands convicted a corporate executive for complicity in war crimes in Guinea and Liberia. and a federal court in the United States convicted a Gambian national on charges of torture. Within sovereign states, stakeholders beyond the government can also step up for human rights. I'm very encouraged by the growing number of cities and regions that are integrating human rights into urban governance. Cities have long been cradles of diversity and freedom, values that test authoritarian rule. Our recent guidelines set out exactly what cities and regions can do to protect their people and their rights. National human rights institutions are another important defense against discrimination, abuse, and the erosion of the rule of law. For example, the NHRI in South Africa is taking legal action to address hate speech. The NHRI in the Philippines has highlighted the impact of fossil fuels on the human rights of marginalized groups. Support for the independence and effectiveness of these national institutions is crucial. Civil society and social movements often drive transformational change, from anti-racism and feminism to climate activism. They are natural partners of my office, and we intend to work more closely together in the future. Philanthropists are key partners to help achieve positive change on the ground. I encourage them to collaborate and amplify their influence. The human rights and humanitarian communities find common ground in protecting civilians from the impact of conflict and crisis, and we must do more to strengthen this essential partnership. Señor Presidente, la educación en materia de derechos humanos es una de las herramientas e inversiones más importantes que tenemos para promover la libertad, evitar la discriminación y fomentar la cohesión. Me congratulo por el compromiso.
Human rights education is one of the most important tools and investments that we have to promote the future of our young people. I am delighted at the commitment and progress of some member states, from Guyana through to Mongolia, the Middle East and South Africa. We're supporting efforts to develop human rights study plans to raise up the voices of young people and to promote civic participation. But we must do much more. Each and every boy and girl, whether in the future they work in agriculture, the digital sphere, medicine, or in trade, must know that human rights are our right from birth and that they affect and concern us, one and all. I call on all member states to take measures and next year to share at the 63rd session of the Council their strategy to ensure that the population are learning about human rights throughout their whole lives.
Mr. President, as my update shows, there are coordinated efforts to undermine human rights and the rule of law around the world. When states cut ties with the system or try to weaken it, when they isolate themselves, everybody loses. In response, we need a cross-regional movement to defend the international system. That is the only viable path to reach collective solutions to the existential threats we face today. Therefore, I hope to work with you on a new initiative through an alliance of member states, philanthropists, civil society and others to strengthen the human rights ecosystem and join the dots between abuses and violations and crisis prevention. This will contribute to achieving the goal of the Secretary General's UN 80 initiative to improve coordination and to deliver better for the people we serve. We are working to convene this alliance on several fronts. First, we will enhance our engagement with all governments, even in the face of fierce disagreement, encouraging frank exchanges and keeping dialogue open. What gives me hope is that the vast majority of people around the world are crying out for human rights and freedoms. Second, we will reinforce the value of human rights to every citizen and every government through positive narratives and creative outreach. Third, we will harness innovation for human rights, including AI, by strengthening our partnerships with tech companies, academics, civil society, and more. Fourth, we will develop and grow support for the human rights economy together with our partners. And fifth, with your support, we will bolster sustainable funding for human rights work by identifying new avenues and models. Because history has shown time and again that no one is safe when human rights are under attack. Abuses committed against one group are always part of a broader pattern of oppression and lead to the wider erosion of fundamental freedoms. Human rights are meant to challenge our assumptions, to identify the blind spots and encourage self-critical reflection, because no one is perfect. Our human rights mechanisms are one of the only parts of the multilateral system that has teeth. I encourage you to use them. Engaging with my office and the human rights system as a whole is valuable not for engagement's sake, but to achieve tangible progress for people everywhere. Together, we must refuse to back down in the face of discrimination, distortion, and lies. Together, we need to safeguard 80 years of progress on freedom, equality, and justice. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much indeed, High Commissioner. We will now take a brief break before undertaking the enhanced interactive dialogue on the human rights situation in Myanmar. Thank you.